Alright, so welcome back to Dominion Snowline Part 2. This is not an official expansion. And so if you're watching this and you didn't watch Part 1, I would recommend clicking off of this and watching Part 1 before you watch Part 2. But assuming you have watched Part 1 already, let's get started. So I'm not doing these in any particular order, just so you know. I just kind of picked them at random. So this one here is Glacier. And if you notice, it's got 3 victory points, just like a duchy. But the cost is 6 money. Now, one thing you should know is you cannot buy this if you do not have any coppers in play. So if you trashed all your coppers, or you trashed most of them, and you get around you want to buy this, you can't buy it unless you have a copper in play. Of course, you can still gain it without having to buy it, but if you gain it, then you don't get this effect either. And when you buy this, each other player gains a Wasteland, a minus point card. So it's only if you buy it. So if you decide to gain this without buying it, you're not going to be able to give these Wastelands out to your opponents. So really the only benefit to getting this is if you're actually going to buy it. Now, because it costs 6 is the reason why you give out these Wastelands to your opponents. Now, the reason why I did it this way is because I wanted to make it so at least Moat would not be able to block this. Yes, there are a couple other reactions that would prevent you from getting a Wasteland. And then, of course, those still work with those in mind. But at least you can't block it with certain reactions, like Moat, and obviously you can't block it with Lighthouse, because this isn't an attack card. So that's kind of something cool to know. So you get a nice little victory point card, just like a duchy for 1 extra money, and you give out Wastelands to everybody else. So that's pretty cool when you think about it. And I also made it so you have to have coppers in play in order to get it. At least 1 in order to buy it. Now, this might be a little bit too strong for a copper strategy. And obviously, it's basically like the original action, Copper Smith. But because it's a treasure and not an action, it is potentially a little stronger than your average Copper Smith from the original Intrigue expansion. So it does exactly the same thing that Coppersmith did, except for a couple of things. First of all, let's just go over it. This is worth a treasure on its own. Then copper produces 1 treasure extra this turn. So basically it turns all your coppers in play into silvers. If you have more than 1 copper in play, trash 1 at the end of the buy phase. So the reason why I did this is because if you had multiple copper mines in play, you could make your coppers cost a whole lot more than just a silver, basically. So if you have more than one of these in play at the same time, you're going to end up losing a copper mine in the process. I did that to try to prevent you from playing too many of these at once in a turn. And of course, if you want to, go for it. But you're going to lose 1 in the process. And then when you buy this, you also gain a copper. So if you're focusing on copper strategy, gaining a copper isn't too bad, obviously. But if you don't want too many coppers in your deck, and you're not planning on buying too many of these, then gaining a copper could, not be the best thing in the world for you. But like I said, I like copper strategies, and so that's why I made this card and made it similar to Coppersmith, was because of that reason. Like I said, it might be too powerful. Maybe I should have made it 5 money instead of 4 money to make it a little hard to purchase. But still, 4 is harder than 3, at least a little bit. Alright, now we have Frigid Village. Now, Frigid Village, you get a card and you get an action when you play it, and at the start of your next turn, you get +1 action. So, it's like it's only like a village on your next turn. The turn you play, you're only going to get a card and you're only going to get an action. And at the start of your next turn, you're going to get a plus action. So if you play a lot of these in a turn and have a lot of them duration-wise, you could have a bunch of extra actions on your next turn, but you're not going to get extra cards. You're just going to get the +1 action. So that's why I made it a 2 constant card instead of like a 3, because of that reason. So you could end up having a lot of actions in your next turn, but once again, if you don't have the action cards, then this isn't extremely useful, which is why it's a 2 costing card. So it's still kind of cool in a way. And because it's a duration card, it will get shuffled less often than the other cards will, because it's a duration card. So that's kind of interesting. So those are some of them. Let's go over a few more in this video if we can. At least a few more. Okay, so you'll notice that this is white and blue. Now, obviously, we now have an official attack reaction card called Black Cat in Dominion Menagerie. And this was created long before I heard about Dominion Menagerie. So, when I created this card, since there was no official attack reaction at the time, I decided to make it look like this. Obviously, that's not the case because Black Cat is all blue, and this is white and blue. So that is, oh well. But it doesn't really upset me too much, because in the end, this white and blue thing just kind of goes with the whole Snowline theme for the expansion I had in mind anyways. So it is an attack reaction, and now that there is an official attack reaction, this is actually pretty cool, because there is official attack reaction now. So let's go over it. Well, it's a Yeti. Who says they didn't exist? We don't know for sure. So +2 treasure. Then you will flip the journey token over, so it works with your journey token from adventures. A lot of stuff in this expansion has to do with adventures, so you're going to need your journey token for adventures to play with this card. It starts face up, or I guess technically you could use a quarter or something like that, heads, tails, etc., etc. If it's face up, each other player discards their hand and draws 4 cards. So as the action part, the action is the attack part, which is pretty cool, that every other time you play it, they're going to discard their hand and draw 4 cards, sort of like Minion from Intrigue, except it's every other turn, and that one gave you a choice to either attack or not to attack. But every time you play it, you're at least going to get the 2 money, so that's something. But if you do this as the reaction part, when someone buys a victory card, you may reveal this from your hand. If you do, they only draw 3 cards for their next hand. So that's even better. Now, obviously, you could reveal this as many times as you wanted to a victory card, but regardless, it won't change the fact that every time you reveal this, they're still only going to draw 3 cards for their next hand. So, yeah, so that's why I worded it just like a normal reaction, like Moat. You could react with Moat as many times as you want, but it wouldn't matter, because it wouldn't change the status quo. And this one does not change the status quo in that sense. You could react with Yeti as many times as you want, but like I said, they're still only going to draw 3 cards to their next hand. You can't make that less. You can't make that more. So that's pretty cool. And it's only when they buy a victory card. So that's the only way you can reveal this from your hand. So that's kind of cool. I mean, you purchase a province, and let's just say the province is in the snowy area, and there's a Yeti that just happens to be in the province that you bought. Yeti is going to show himself. You're going to get scared and run, and your next turn you're going to only have 3 cards. So that was the theme of what I was thinking for the card. And then, of course, you know, if Yetis were real, which they could have been, a Yeti isn't going to show up every time you look for a Yeti. They're going to show up once in a while only once in a blue moon. So that's why I came up with the idea that you have to flip your journey token over to see if it's going to attack or not. So that was kind of a thematic aspect as well for the card. Then we have a 4-costing card, Action Reaction, so another reaction, called Ice Sculptures. That's kind of cool, right? This is very similar to a card from Seaside called Treasure Map, but it might even be considered more powerful too. So you trash this at an Ice Sculptures from your hand, just like you would with the Treasure Map. If you trashed 2 Ice Sculptures, gain 3 cards costing up to 5. So that's very powerful, but it's hard to do. Getting those 2 Ice Sculptures in your hand at the same time and then being able to play one and trash both of them is not going to be a simple thing to do. And just like with Treasure Map, it wasn't an easy thing to do either. So in a sense, it's not super overpoweringly powerful because it's something that takes time to pull off if you can pull it off. And then if this is and then here's the reaction part of it. So this is what makes it even more useful than treasure map. If this is trashed not during your turn, you may reveal this and gain 2 cards costing up to 4. So if, like, you know, you guys are all familiar with Giant from Adventures, right? And cards costing from 3 to 6 were trashed with Giant. Well, this is 4, so that's between those numbers. So if this was trashed, you could reveal it as it was being trashed and gain 2 cards costing up to 4. So that's kind of cool. It makes it useful if you accidentally lose ice sculptures in the process. You could potentially at least get something out of the cards you're losing if this was the card that got trashed. So that's kind of cool, for sure. Then we have a new, or should I say another reserve card. Snowshoes was in the last video. So here's another one that works with your Tavern mat, Lodge. You get 3 actions, and you get 2 treasure. And then you put this on your Tavern mat. Then at the start of your buy phase, you may call this if you have at least 2 unused actions. So that's kind of cool. If you didn't end up using all your actions on your turn, you could call this if you had at least 2 unused actions. Now, normally when you play the game, you have to keep track of your actions when you're playing the game. You have to keep track exactly how many actions up to the point until your last action. So this makes you think of keeping an eye on your actions even after you run out of action cards, because if you have at least 2 unused actions, you can call this back. So that gives you another reason to hold on to how many actions you have. And it also gives you another reason to keep track of how many actions you have. So, for instance, if you played Lodge and you only played 1 more action card after it and it didn't give you plus actions, or you didn't play any action cards afterwards, you would have at least 2 unused actions and you could call it back. But if you end up using some of those actions, then obviously you may not be calling this back for a while. Alright, so that's it for part 2.